They blocked me like prison guards, HR on the left, security on the right. No warning, no handshake, just a sheet of paper and a plastic badge that said visitor, like I hadn't bled 15-hour days into their billion-dollar launch. That's how they do it now. Nice and quiet. No emails, no footprints. My name is Ethan Vale. I'm 43 years old, and until this morning, I was the senior systems architect at Zadara Tech, one of the most powerful tech conglomerates on the West Coast. I wasn't just any architect. I was the guy behind Argus, an AI-driven logistics platform with military-grade predictive modeling and adaptive routing systems. It was built to run global supply chains faster than any human could dream of managing them. And it was mine. Every override protocol, every line of self-correcting code, mine. But that didn't matter, apparently. I'd walked into conference room B expecting a final roundtable before launch. Instead, Meredith from HR was waiting with Tom, her nervous little sidekick. Between them stood a security officer with a radio strapped to his chest, like I was about to start throwing punches. Meredith smiled like this was all routine. "Ethan," she said, "your services are no longer required." She slid a folder across the table. No severance, no reason. Just a typed memo about organizational restructuring and a barcode badge to scan myself out of the only building I've worked in for 9 years. I didn't speak. Not because I was stunned, though I was, but because I knew speaking would be a mistake. Rage lives in the mouth. Strategy lives in silence. Tom looked everywhere but at me. Meredith offered me a smile, like she was doing me a favor. "You'll need to leave the premises immediately," she said, "but you can return tomorrow with an escort to collect your personal items." They weren't just cutting me out. They were planning to scrub me from the machine, like I'd never been there. Argus was scheduled to go live in less than a week. Every executive would be standing on a stage smiling, showing off a system that could reroute cargo shipments in real time based on war zones, weather, and market fluctuations. That system didn't come from them. It came from me. But once Argus went live, my access would be terminated. The version they were taking live was the one I handed over, until now. On my walkout, no one said a word. No one made eye contact. Cowards, all of them. My team probably got an email after I was gone. Effective immediately. I didn't toss the visitor badge in the trash like they wanted. I walked down the silent hallway to the top floor. The glass double doors of the executive suite were cracked open. I stepped inside, quiet, calm. No one was there. I walked past the leather chairs and walnut conference table and laid the plastic badge squarely in the center of CEO Wallace Drexler's pristine white desk. Let them know I wasn't walking out quietly. I made it to my car, locked the doors, sat for a full minute. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. They should have been, but they weren't. My phone was buzzing. Emails, texts, calendar invites still trying to ping me like nothing had happened. I didn't touch it. Instead, I reached under the driver's seat and pulled out a black case. Inside was a tablet with no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no GPS. It was one of 3 air-gapped systems I kept offline. Paranoid? Maybe. But when you've built the kind of neural architecture Argus runs on, you learn not to trust the cloud. I powered it on, entered the encryption key. The screen blinked once, then opened to a black terminal. I typed 2 words. Operation Blackout. This wasn't some petty revenge plan. I wasn't going to torch their servers or leak their code. Number. This was chess, not fire. Operation Blackout wasn't designed in anger. I'd been building it quietly for months, just in case. A private suite of commands embedded deep in the Argus codebase. Dormant, invisible. But if activated, it could lock out every executive credential, reroute key functions through ghost protocols, and replicate itself through all mirrors of the system. Zadara Tech wouldn't even realize they were locked out until Argus started ignoring their commands. Because I didn't build Argus to be obedient, I built it to obey its architect. I started the script compile. It would take time, a few days maybe, but once it was in position, all I'd need was a final key phrase to activate it. Let them have their press conferences. Let Wallace Drexler beam into interviews about cutting-edge efficiency. Let them cash their bonuses while my name disappears from the documentation. They think they stole a machine. They forgot who built the machine. They thought I'd disappear quietly, fade into the void like a broken string of code. But I didn't vanish. I adapted. I relocated to a place they wouldn't even think to look, an abandoned machine shop on the edge of the industrial district, where no one asked questions and the only sound was the buzz of sodium lamps and the occasional train rattling by. The floors were cracked concrete, the windows boarded. Inside, I built a stripped-down operations nest. No cameras, no smart devices, no traceable signals. Just old steel tables, cold air, and machines I trusted because I built them myself. Air-gapped laptops, hardline-only servers. Isolated sandbox environments I could detonate if compromised. This was the ghost layer, my layer, and from here, I could reach into Argus without them ever feeling the breath on their necks. They had revoked my credentials, wiped my email, shut down my VPN keys, but they couldn't erase the deeper structure. The skeleton of Argus was mine, and I designed it with caution, layered over paranoia. Legacy command trees, hardwired into base-level logic, lived in fragments of redundant code no code audit would ever flag. Because I wrote them in ways that looked like mistakes, that's the trick. Hide brilliance in failure. I booted up an access tunnel built during the earliest stages of Argus, before documentation, before oversight. It connected to a cluster of phantom nodes, data caches I'd embedded behind false registry entries. They weren't supposed to exist. To the system, they were ghosts. But ghosts can move things. I tested a diagnostic ping. It echoed back in 2.4 milliseconds. The node was alive, untouched. So I began. The first wave was quiet. A time delay script that injected minor latency into the fleet routing protocols, just enough to throw shipment timing off by 12 to 14 minutes. Nothing anyone would notice at first. But delay leads to audit, and audit leads to questions. I tagged the inconsistencies to mimic a third-party vendor signature, a false trail. Within 24 hours, warehouse sync logs were out of alignment. Route optimization failed to update in real time. Drivers were getting rerouted to depots already at capacity. And Argus, it didn't know why. Not because it was broken, because it was too smart. The code recognized the inputs but couldn't reconcile the output, like giving a genius a riddle with missing pieces. Meanwhile, I watched. I tapped into the corporate back door from a monitoring feed I'd written under the alias of a maintenance demon. It gave me access to the system logs, incident tickets, and internal chatter. That's where I saw the panic start to bloom. Someone update the DHL sync config? Seeing 406 errors on the East Coast nodes, tagging ops. Is this a QA issue or something deeper? They blame vendors, then interns. Classic. No one looked at the foundation. No one looked at me, but I looked at them. Simon Carr. His name came up in a boardroom summary memo. Carr to deliver Argus Phase 1 launch presentation. That was my first confirmation, my protege, my shadow. The guy I trained for 5 years was now standing in my shoes and pretending he built the floor beneath them. I knew Simon too well. He was brilliant, but brittle. Smart enough to replicate a structure, too arrogant to understand the engineering beneath it. The kind of guy who thought clean UI and boardroom swagger were the same as architecture. But Simon didn't act alone. He couldn't have. I kept digging. Legal had filed accelerated patent transfers under emergency organizational stability clauses. Compliance signed off on privilege escalations that unlocked my private Git branches. HR had the paperwork ready days before I walked in. It was coordinated, a purge. And Simon, he wasn't the architect, he was the face, the marionette dancing for the executives who wanted clean hands and fat stock options. They didn't want a genius, they wanted a controllable one. Fine, I wasn't after chaos, not yet. I wanted something better. Dissonance. I activated Phase 1 from the Ghost layer, a silent function hidden inside a deprecated module labeled Test Artifact B-19, something any sysadmin would archive and forget. The moment it ran, Argus began to reassign key operational tags with randomized markers. Package IDs, route codes, client tags, scrambled. Nothing connected anymore. Containers were matched with the wrong manifests. Customs clearance failed. Automated reports began conflicting with live inventory. Argus didn't crash. It choked. On its own brilliance, on the logic loops that couldn't make sense of nonsense. And while the system stuttered, I watched the executive Slack light up like a Christmas tree. What the hell is 77 Lima doing in Ontario? Why is inventory 219 tagging under 2 clients? Who greenlit test artifact B19? No one had an answer. They were speaking louder now, but not to each other, at each other. Good. Let them dig through their logs. Let Simon call in consultants. Let Wallace Drexler summon crisis teams. I wanted them paranoid, questioning each other, wondering if Argus was too complex to control, or if someone else was already controlling it. Because I was, and I hadn't even warmed up yet. The first sign of collapse wasn't the error codes, it was the silence, the kind that spreads across systems when logic starts to fray. Slow, invisible, contagious. Argus had always been built to think faster than its operators. Now, it was doing exactly that, just not for them. They scheduled an emergency all-hands meeting at 7 a.m., a desperation move masked as leadership. I wasn't there, obviously. But I didn't need to be. I had full access to the internal conferencing streams, courtesy of an embedded phantom node that mirrored video feeds under a junk IP segment. They still hadn't found it. They wouldn't. I watched from the ghost layer as Simon stood in front of a LED board, pale, sweaty, voice trembling like a rookie substitute teacher. We're aware of the inconsistencies in logistics tagging and shipment validation. Our teams are actively investigating what we believe to be a third-party data sync error. Lies, hesitation, fear. Behind him, the Argus Analytics dashboard was a mosaic of contradictions. Real shipments were marked as phantom. Non-existent warehouses showed movement. One data block had assigned the same crate to 4 separate countries. The machine was hallucinating, but with purpose. Because I was behind the eyes now, and I had no intention of letting them breathe easy again. Phase 2 was already live, a trigger buried in a rollback contingency clause they never audited, phantom approvals. It worked like this. I mimicked executive credentials, Simon's mostly, and used them to authorize shipments to ghost locations, places that didn't exist physically, but did exist in the shadow data structures I'd left behind during build-out. To Argus, it was legitimate. To the scanners, the crates were real. To the executives, the numbers were exploding. By mid-morning, the boardroom was in full meltdown. Inventory counts doubled without moving. RFID scanners chirped with false positives. East Coast warehouses reported crates arriving that hadn't been dispatched. The insurance flags alone triggered internal compliance reviews. And every time they tried to trace the logic path, it would dead end into a block labeled System Legacy Non-Modifiable. That was me. That was always me. I didn't just build Argus to run. I built it to recognize ownership and to resist theft. The best part? Their audit logs didn't show a breach. Because I wasn't breaching, I was operating inside the design. My design. I'd scrubbed myself from access records months ago, back when I first suspected Simon was sniffing around my code like a dog near a loaded trap. I had no fingerprints, no login history, no MAC addresses. To the system, I was a phantom function, uncallable unless you knew the syntax, and no one left at Zadaratech did. But the cracks were forming fast. A fleet of drones rerouted to an inactive depot in Nevada and ran out of charge on landing. A shipment of lithium batteries was flagged for import fraud in Singapore after Argus cross-tagged it with a medical supplies manifest. A fire suppression system failed to trigger in a Portland warehouse because Argus skipped the smoke index. It thought the building didn't exist. Every failure precise, measured, cold. I monitored it all from my corner of the industrial wasteland. One screen tracked supply chain failures. Another ran a pulse scan on their stock value. It had dipped 3 points by noon. Not much, but enough. Investors hate uncertainty more than they hate failure. And Argus was making the world very uncertain. I gave them until dusk. Then I mailed the package. No return address. Just a flat cardboard envelope delivered to 6 independent media outlets, all known for tech journalism and investigative work. Inside, copies of internal emails between Wallace Drexler and the board discussing my removal, time-stamped blueprints showing my code commits, the ones Simon took credit for, and the crown jewel, an audio recording pulled from a tapped executive Slack huddle. Wallace laughing, "Perfect timing, gentlemen." Got rid of the dead weight just in time to announce Phase 1. By next quarter, we're in the black and Vale's name is wiped clean. Hell, we should send him a thank you card. I didn't want a thank you card. I wanted the fire. and it started slowly. Online whispers, Reddit threads, Slack leaks. Did anyone else notice the Argus system glitching just after the architect was fired? Wait, this is the guy who built it, and they canned him before launch. Inside job, check this thread. By midnight, the hashtag #Whistleveil was trending on 2 continents. They wanted a ghost. They got one. And I was just getting started. They wanted a machine that could think faster than any human, predict global logistics before the market even twitched, and automate decisions in seconds. They just didn't think about what would happen when that machine turned on them. Phase 3 wasn't designed to punish. It was designed to expose, to rip off the polished corporate veneer and show the rot underneath. Not just the theft of my work, not just the betrayal, the whole ecosystem of manipulation, silencing, and control. Collapse protocol began at 2:03 a.m., UTC, 1 script, 2 keystrokes. I watched from the ghost layer as the first alert silently detonated, an encrypted cascade that unlocked sealed legal records, performance reviews, and non-compete clauses buried deep in the HR archive. Within seconds, those files were anonymously forwarded to the inboxes of 3 labor rights watchdogs, 2 federal regulators, and a reporter I trusted with my life. I didn't sign a single name. I didn't have to. Next, I triggered a localized data scramble inside the payroll module, something I'd never tested, just theorized. In milliseconds, employee payment files re-encrypted themselves and reassigned salary disbursements with fractional delays. The system's security algorithm read the inconsistencies as a fraud flag and suspended all outgoing payments. At 8:01 a.m., Zedaratech missed its first payroll cycle in 27 years. By noon, the exodus had begun. Project managers logged in to find their task boards gone. Engineers couldn't access their own commit histories. Procurement teams found their supplier contracts missing key pages, like someone had cut them with scissors. People panicked, then left. Those who stayed? They were stuck in front of locked terminals, watching error messages loop across their screens like taunts. Simon Carr tried to fight it. I watched his access attempts. He kept requesting admin overrides, escalating tickets, screaming into video meetings. But Argus didn't just reject him, it ignored him. His credentials still existed, but the system treated him like static. And then someone blinked, a whisper from the board. An emergency administrative leave. Simon was quietly removed from all channels. A vague company-wide message about strategic redirection. They didn't even give him the dignity of a name. Wallace Drexler disappeared the same afternoon. No press, no statement. Just gone. A ghost. Fitting, really. Meanwhile, the board scrambled. They rushed into talks with a holding company based in Zurich, hoping to sell the Argus platform before it collapsed completely. But I was already there. The due diligence report came through a third-party server I'd been monitoring for months. One minor data injection, a checksum error buried in the margin logs, and the report corrupted itself in transmission. The buyers reviewed it, paused, then walked. Collapse protocol wasn't loud. It wasn't fire and explosions. It was rust, corruption at the code level, one invisible strand after another until the whole machine seized up under its own elegance. They didn't understand Argus, not really. They thought it was just logistics, just prediction. But it was alive in the way systems are alive, pattern-hungry, logic-driven, obedient to structure. And I'd built its soul. I watched the servers flicker in real time. Data lakes drained themselves, subroutines spun into infinite loops. And finally, at 11:46 p.m., the last server in the chain responded to the final heartbeat ping and then shut down. Blackout, clean, precise. I leaned back in the metal chair, the cracked leather creaking beneath me. I was alone in a place no GPS could name, surrounded by machines that didn't talk to the outside world. A silent cathedral of vengeance. I opened my secure journal, one of the last files I kept purely for myself. No sync, no backups, just black text on a black screen. They built a machine they couldn't understand. I made sure it would only obey the man who knew its soul. I read it twice. Then I deleted the file. Not archived, not encrypted. Deleted. Permanently. Let them chase shadows. Let them convene emergency boards and hire forensic firms and blame each other until their empires crumble. I wouldn't be part of that noise. My work was done. My presence was gone. But Argus? Argus would remember who it truly belonged to. Not them. Me. The window's open. The breeze rolls in with that highland smell, pine and damp stone, and something clean you can't quite name. Birds chatter, but distant. Like they know not to come too close. My chair creaks a little as I lean back, eyes off the screen, fingers relaxed over the keys. For the first time in years, I don't feel the need to solve anything. No fires, no timelines, just air and silence and clarity. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I disappeared. I go by a different name now, on paper, on contracts, even the voice I use on calls, doesn't matter. The clients I work with now aren't Fortune 5s. They're small, nimble, independent, the kind of companies that still care about their people. They don't know who I was, not really. Just that I know how to make their systems bulletproof, that I specialize in protecting them from the very kind of breach they read about half a year ago, the one that tore Zedaratech apart. They renamed the company 2 months after the collapse, said it was part of a strategic rebranding initiative. What they didn't say, what they couldn't say, was that Argus never recovered, that the AI refused new credentials, rejected data inputs, and couldn't be ported without eating itself alive. They tried to patch it, fork it, sell off pieces of the code to overseas firms. Nothing held. Argus wasn't software, it was structure. You couldn't just copy it, you had to understand it, and they never did. They shelved the system quietly in Q2, wrote it off as too advanced for current operational environments. The press swallowed that, most of it anyway. There were rumors, sure, whispers about an inside job, a whistleblower, ghost code, but the settlement gag orders made sure no one official would ever talk. Simon Carr vanished from tech circuits. Last I saw, he tried to get hired at a mid-tier logistics firm in Toronto. Blacklisted. Word travels fast in closed circles, especially when you fail that publicly. He submitted a patent claim on an old Argus module 2 weeks later. It was denied. The IP still belonged to Zedaratech's legal entity, what was left of it. Wallace Drexler retired. Early, quiet. His name doesn't even show up on their website anymore. Scrubbed, sanitized. I imagine him in some gated villa, pretending not to check the news, wondering when the next story will leak. The board? Most of them took their money and ran. A few were named in the shareholder suits, settled fast, behind closed doors. Anything to avoid an audit that would have exposed the skeletons still buried in compliance logs and HR folders. None of that brings me satisfaction. This isn't about satisfaction, it's about completion. A reporter emailed me last night. Young, curious, probably brave enough to keep digging after everyone else moved on. The subject line just said, "Can we talk? Even off the record?" She mentioned Argus, the blackout, the leaked files, said she was chasing ghosts, wanted to know if I still existed or if the story ended at the server room doors. I didn't reply. Because the story doesn't belong to her. It doesn't belong to anyone, except me. I reach for the leather-bound journal on the edge of my desk. Handmade, blank. The kind of thing you only use when you've earned a moment worth recording. I haven't opened it before today, not once, but now, I think it's time. I turn to the first clean page. The pen feels heavier than it should, maybe because this is the last thing I plan to write about any of it. Not for records, not for justice, just to remember. I write, they took my badge, my title, my access, but they forgot. I wasn't part of the machine. I was the man who built it, and when they locked the exits, I turned off the lights. Then I pause. Not because I don't know what name to write, I do. Just the architect. I close the journal. The wind picks up again. Somewhere behind the trees, a hawk screams into the sky, sharp and alone. I don't check my messages. I don't look at the news. I know what's out there. I know who's still trying to make sense of how it all unraveled. But that's the thing about machines built too big, too fast, by people who only understand the outcome, not the origin. They can't tell when the soul has already left the system. And I'm not going back. Not ever.